Maria Alvarez spoke before anyone expected answers, her voice steady, eyes kind, words sharp with memory, as the American family listened in silence, unsure why her simple greeting felt like a challenge. Before you continue, she would have smiled and asked you to comment where you are watching from and subscribe, because stories live longer when shared. She said culture is not decoration or costume, but daily choices repeated until they become character. She spoke of the Philippines as a place where values are learned at the table, not preached from stages. Respect, she said, begins with how children greet elders, how neighbors are acknowledged, how gratitude is practiced aloud. She reminded them that strength is quiet when it knows itself. Her hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from care, because she believed words should be earned. The family expected nostalgia, yet received conviction. Maria insisted that belonging is a duty, not a privilege, and that community survives through obligation. She spoke as someone who had endured storms without applause, rebuilding mornings patiently. The room felt smaller, as if history leaned closer, asking everyone present to listen carefully and remember what truly endures. Years earlier, Maria had met John Miller at a crowded airport, when a delayed flight forced strangers into conversation and impatience. John complained about inefficiency, about time wasted, about systems failing people who worked hard. Maria listened, then asked who raised him. The question surprised him, because it carried no accusation, only curiosity. She explained that where she came from, delays were invitations to practice patience, not excuses to perform frustration. She described growing up with grandparents who taught her to wait without resentment and help without reward. John argued that progress required speed, competition, and constant improvement. Maria nodded, agreeing progress mattered, but asked what happened when progress forgot people. She told him about neighbors sharing rice during shortages, about children sleeping contentedly because adults worried together. John dismissed it as romantic, yet something unsettled him. When they boarded, he realized he had never asked his parents about their parents. He had never learned their stories. Maria watched him walk ahead, knowing seeds rarely announce when they begin growing, and that discomfort often precedes understanding. When John later arrived in the Philippines with his wife Claire and daughter Emily, he remembered Maria's question like an unfinished sentence. They had come for work, yet curiosity followed them everywhere, from street greetings to shared laughter over meals. Emily noticed how adults listened to her seriously, how strangers called her hija, treating her like kin. Claire felt disarmed by generosity that asked for nothing. John remained cautious, measuring kindness against suspicion. Then they met Maria again at a community gathering, her presence unchanged, welcoming yet firm. She invited them to sit, eat, and listen. She spoke of Utang na Loob, explaining gratitude as a lifelong thread connecting people beyond transactions. She described Bayanihan as action, not metaphor, neighbors lifting burdens together because survival required cooperation. John questioned whether such values survived modern pressures. Maria replied that values adapt when lived, not when archived. She challenged him to observe, not judge. Over weeks, he watched families care for elders at home, children serving guests without prompting. Slowly, his skepticism softened, replaced by questions he had never asked himself before, about success, fulfillment, and the cost of individualism. Maria's stories deepened, tracing her childhood during lean years when scarcity sharpened empathy rather than cruelty. She recalled waking before dawn to help her mother prepare food for neighbors who had less, learning generosity before ambition. Education mattered, she said, but wisdom mattered more, because intelligence without compassion builds lonely towers. John listened, thinking of his own upbringing, efficient yet distant, where independence was celebrated and dependence quietly shamed. Maria argued that the Philippines taught interdependence, the understanding that strength multiplies when shared. She spoke of respect encoded in language, the careful use of P and OPO shaping humility daily. Claire noticed how these habits created calm rather than fear. Emily absorbed everything, imitating greetings, offering help instinctively. John felt unsettled, recognizing how little he had taught his daughter about service. Maria emphasized that culture survives through repetition, not slogans, through everyday rituals that anchor people during uncertainty. She said storms come often, but preparation includes values, not supplies alone. Watching Maria, John realized she carried history without bitterness, pride without arrogance, and certainty without loudness, qualities he had rarely encountered but suddenly deeply admired. One evening, conversation turned tense when John challenged Maria directly, asking whether these values limited ambition and global competitiveness. Maria smiled gently, as if anticipating the question for decades. She responded that ambition guided by values becomes purpose, while ambition alone consumes itself. She cited Filipinos working abroad, sacrificing proximity to family to support many lives, calling it love expressed through endurance. She asked John whether success felt complete without shared meaning. He hesitated, recalling promotions celebrated alone, milestones marked quietly. Maria described dignity as collective, how one person's rise carried responsibility to lift others. She spoke of discipline learned through obligation, not enforcement, and accountability rooted in shame avoided through honor. John countered that systems mattered more than sentiments. Maria agreed, but insisted systems fail without moral glue. She reminded him that cultures collapse when convenience replaces commitment. Silence followed, heavy yet respectful. Claire squeezed John's hand, sensing transformation beginning. Emily asked why people smiled so much here. Maria answered that smiling acknowledges struggle without surrendering joy. John felt something shift, realizing happiness could coexist with hardship when values offered direction and belonging. Days passed, and John observed subtle lessons unfolding around him. A neighbor corrected Emily gently, never humiliating her, teaching without diminishing dignity. Market vendors trusted customers on credit, relying on reputation rather than contracts. Maria explained Haya as self-regulation, a sense of honor guiding behavior when no authority watched. John contrasted this with his reliance on rules and surveillance back home. He began recognizing how trust reduced friction, how shared norms lowered anxiety. Maria spoke about elders not as burdens but as libraries, living memory deserving patience. She described evenings spent listening to stories, absorbing lessons without lectures. John realized his own grandparents had died strangers to him, their experiences unrecorded. Regret surfaced, unfamiliar and sharp. Maria did not console him directly, she allowed silence to teach. She believed understanding must be earned internally. Claire noted how community celebrations included everyone, regardless of status, dissolving hierarchies temporarily. John wondered whether equality could exist without uniformity. Maria suggested respect created balance, not sameness. Gradually, John's worldview expanded, not collapsing, but reorganizing around principles he had underestimated, now recognizing their resilience and quiet power. Conflict emerged when John's company proposed restructuring that threatened local jobs. He approached Maria, seeking perspective beyond policy manuals. Maria asked whether decisions considered families or merely numbers. She urged him to visit affected homes, to witness consequences personally. Reluctantly, he did. He met parents anxious yet composed, children still respectful, dignity intact despite uncertainty. Their restraint humbled him. Maria explained that resilience grows from cultural roots, enabling people to face adversity together. She cautioned that exploiting such resilience without reciprocation was moral failure. John confronted executives, advocating compromise, drawing on community solidarity he had witnessed. Resistance was strong, yet his conviction surprised even himself. Claire supported him, recognizing alignment forming between belief and action. Emily watched proudly, learning courage through example. Maria reminded John that values demand sacrifice, often inconvenient. She said culture proves itself when tested, not celebrated during ease. John realized he was choosing identity over advancement, a decision previously unthinkable. Though outcomes remained uncertain, he felt grounded. For the first time, his work reflected conscience, influenced by a grandmother whose lessons reshaped priorities without coercion, only clarity and unwavering belief. As negotiations continued, Maria shared her own sacrifices, including children raised with limited resources yet abundant affection. She described teaching them to bow their heads, to serve guests first, to share achievements humbly. She admitted mistakes, moments of impatience, but emphasized repair over perfection. John appreciated her honesty, understanding culture as evolving practice, not flawless ideal. She warned against romanticizing hardship, insisting dignity required justice alongside patience. Maria believed values empowered people to demand fairness respectfully. John applied this insight, framing proposals collaboratively rather than confrontationally. The company adjusted plans, preserving jobs while restructuring gradually. Relief spread through the community, gratitude expressed collectively, not toward John alone. Maria insisted praise belonged to everyone who spoke and listened. John experienced fulfillment unfamiliar yet profound. He understood success measured by collective well-being felt different, warmer, lasting. Emily celebrated with friends, unconcerned with credit. Claire reflected on how quickly their family had changed. Maria observed quietly, satisfied yet cautious, knowing values must be maintained through continued practice. She reminded them that culture weakens when treated as destination rather than daily responsibility, urging vigilance beyond victories. Departure approached, bringing reflection and quiet sadness. John feared losing what he had learned once removed from the environment nurturing it. Maria acknowledged this fear, explaining that values travel when internalized. She advised him to recreate rituals intentionally, honoring elders, fostering community, practicing gratitude aloud. She said culture survives migration through conscious repetition. John promised to call his parents, to ask questions long ignored. He vowed to teach Emily service before success. Maria asked only that he remember people whenever making decisions. On their final evening, neighbors gathered, sharing food, laughter, and stories, marking transition without dramatics. Maria offered a simple blessing, wishing courage anchored in compassion. John thanked her, voice breaking unexpectedly. He realized he had encountered not superiority, but coherence, a value system reinforcing humanity. Maria corrected him gently, stating values differ, yet some sustain communities more reliably. She said the Philippines endured because its people prioritized relationships over convenience. As the family left, John carried lessons heavier than souvenirs, determined to honor them through consistent action rather than nostalgia or fleeting admiration. Back home, adjustment proved challenging. Individualism reasserted itself quickly, deadlines crowding reflection. John consciously slowed interactions, greeting colleagues warmly, listening longer. Some responded cautiously, others appreciatively. He organized family dinners, inviting neighbors, reviving communal spirit awkwardly yet sincerely. Emily taught classmates Filipino greetings, proud and unembarrassed. Claire volunteered locally, seeking connection beyond efficiency. John faced skepticism, accused of idealism. He remembered Maria's calm resilience, choosing patience over defensiveness. He integrated values gradually, aligning policies with people-focused outcomes. Small changes accumulated, trust-strengthening teams. He contacted his parents, initiating conversations about heritage, discovering stories lost to silence. Regret transformed into gratitude. John realized culture required courage to resist default behaviors. Maria's voice guided him, emphasizing consistency. When challenges arose, he asked which choice preserved dignity. Progress felt slower yet sturdier. He understood now why Maria spoke confidently about cultural strength. It sustained humanity under pressure. Though far away, he felt connected, practicing values daily, honoring their origin without imitation, adapting them respectfully within his context, ensuring lessons endured beyond geography. Years later, Emily grew into a thoughtful young woman, shaped by blended influences yet grounded in respect. She visited the Philippines alone, seeking Maria, who welcomed her with familiar warmth. Emily shared how values learned guided friendships, leadership, and service. Maria listened, proud but humble, reminding her that influence multiplies when shared quietly. Emily observed how culture persisted despite modernization, adapting without losing essence. She saw youth caring for elders, technology coexisting with tradition. Maria explained that values survive because they serve people, not eras. Emily recorded stories, preserving memory responsibly. She recognized obligation accompanying inheritance. Maria spoke of death calmly, framing life as stewardship rather than possession. Emily felt the weight of continuity, understanding responsibility extended beyond admiration. When she returned home, she advocated empathetic leadership, referencing lessons indirectly. Maria aged gracefully, supported by community she nurtured. News eventually arrived of her passing, mourned collectively, celebrated through stories. John and Claire honored her by continuing her practices. They knew cultural strength was proven not by claims, but by lives influenced across borders, sustained through everyday decisions rooted in respect, compassion, and shared responsibility. Maria's absence sharpened appreciation, revealing how deeply her values had embedded themselves within those she touched. John noticed how conversations referenced her wisdom naturally, guiding choices unconsciously. He realized cultural transmission succeeds when names fade but principles remain. Emily organized community dialogues, encouraging intergenerational exchange, citing her grandmother figure's lessons without spectacle. Claire wrote reflections on belonging, emphasizing care over convenience. Resistance persisted, yet perseverance prevailed. Maria's teachings adapted, respecting context while preserving core. John encountered crises where efficiency tempted compromise, but dignity redirected him. He recognized leadership as service, authority as trust. The Philippine values Maria championed no longer felt foreign, they felt essential. He understood now why she spoke assertively to strangers. Confident values required articulation to survive. He shared stories deliberately, inviting curiosity rather than superiority. Communities responded gradually, drawn to authenticity. John measured impact not by metrics alone, but by cohesion during stress. He acknowledged imperfections, striving toward alignment. Maria's life demonstrated that cultural strength emerges through consistency across generations. Her story lived on through actions, reinforcing belief that the Philippines' values endured because people chose them repeatedly, even when inconvenient, ensuring continuity through conscious practice and unwavering commitment. Reflecting often, John traced transformation back to discomfort, recognizing challenge as catalyst. Maria never sought agreement, only understanding. Her confidence stemmed from lived evidence, not comparison. He learned that asserting cultural strength invites scrutiny, requiring integrity to withstand examination. Philippine values thrived because they were practiced publicly and privately. John observed how shame and honor regulated behavior more effectively than punishment alone. He adapted this insight cautiously, avoiding coercion, emphasizing shared standards. Emily embraced accountability among peers, fostering trust. Claire mentored families, emphasizing care networks. The family's influence expanded organically, unbranded, sincere. Critics accused them of romanticism, yet results persisted. John accepted that skepticism accompanies change. Maria's voice echoed, reminding him patience builds legitimacy. He honored differences, avoiding universal claims, yet maintained conviction about values' effectiveness. He realized cultural pride becomes dangerous when weaponized, but powerful when grounded in humility. Maria exemplified this balance. She celebrated heritage without exclusion. John strove to emulate this, acknowledging others' strengths while advocating empathy. The story continued, not ending with agreement, but with sustained dialogue, shaped by a grandmother who believed culture's strength lay in its ability to humanize consistently. Time softened edges, but principles remained sharp. John's workplace evolved into a supportive environment, weathering crises with solidarity. He attributed success to values integrated intentionally, not superficially. Maria's lessons guided conflict resolution, prioritizing dignity. Emily pursued studies in social development, inspired by lived experience. She framed research around community resilience, honoring origins discreetly. Claire facilitated gatherings bridging cultures, fostering mutual learning. The family understood cultural exchange required respect, not appropriation. Maria's legacy provided compass, not blueprint. They adapted practices thoughtfully, mindful of context. John recognized that claiming strongest values invites responsibility to demonstrate them. He emphasized humility, acknowledging imperfections. When asked about influence, he credited a Filipino grandmother who spoke honestly. He described how her confidence rested on service, not assertion. Listeners responded, curious rather than defensive. Dialogue expanded. Maria's story reached audiences indirectly, inspiring reflection. Her values traveled quietly, integrated authentically. John realized cultural strength is measured by endurance under adaptation. Philippine values endured because they centered humanity. This realization anchored him, guiding future choices. He accepted that transformation remains ongoing, requiring vigilance. Maria's teachings persisted through conscious effort, ensuring her voice resonated through actions shaping communities beyond borders. Anniversaries passed, marked by remembrance rather than ceremony. John visited the Philippines again, honoring Maria's resting place respectfully. He observed how community continued seamlessly, supporting one another naturally. He felt gratitude without possessiveness. Returning home, he recommitted to daily practice, understanding legacy demands maintenance. Emily published work highlighting community-driven resilience, influencing policy discussions subtly. Claire expanded support networks, reinforcing care infrastructures. Resistance softened as outcomes spoke. John maintint openness, inviting critique. He learned that cultural confidence invites dialogue, not domination. Maria's example guided tone. He shared stories responsibly, avoiding simplification. Audiences appreciated nuance. John recognized that values must remain flexible, responsive to change. He resisted idolizing past forms, focusing on principles. Maria had emphasized this distinction. He taught teams to prioritize people during transformation. Success followed gradually. The family acknowledged debt owed to a grandmother who spoke candidly. They repaid it through service. John believed now that cultural strength emerges through repeated ethical choices, sustained across contexts. Maria's conviction proved accurate, not through argument, but through lived outcomes. Her story continued, shaping lives quietly, affirming that Philippine cultural values endure because they consistently nurture humanity, resilience, and shared responsibility. As decades unfolded, Maria's influence diffused beyond identifiable boundaries. Former colleagues adopted inclusive practices, citing benefits without referencing origins. Communities strengthened subtly. John accepted anonymity as success indicator. Emily mentored leaders, emphasizing humility. Claire documented narratives, preserving memory responsibly. The family understood that claiming cultural superiority risked alienation. They reframed conversations toward effectiveness, not hierarchy. Maria's teachings supported this approach. She believed values prove themselves through outcomes, not declarations. John shared comparative insights cautiously, respecting diversity. He emphasized that Philippine values offered one effective model among many, adaptable. This balance preserved credibility. Audiences responded thoughtfully. John recognized that strong cultures invite learning, not competition. Maria exemplified generosity of spirit. Her confidence never diminished others. The family emulated this. When challenges arose, they returned to fundamentals: respect, gratitude, community. These principles stabilized decisions. John reflected on transformation with humility, acknowledging initial resistance. He appreciated discomfort as teacher. Maria's courage to speak directly catalyzed change. He resolved to honor her by speaking truthfully when necessary, grounded in compassion. Cultural strength, he learned, requires voice and action. Maria had provided both, shaping lives through integrity, ensuring values endured across generations and geographies. Eventually, John retired, reflecting on career defined increasingly by conscience. He mentored successors, emphasizing people-centered leadership. Emily continued influencing policy ethically. Claire sustained community initiatives. Maria's story surfaced occasionally, sparking curiosity. John shared selectively, preserving nuance. He acknowledged that not all values translate seamlessly, requiring adaptation. Maria had taught discernment. John's understanding matured, appreciating complexity. He realized culture is dynamic, negotiated continually. Philippine values persisted because they accommodated change while preserving core. This insight guided him. He resisted rigid replication, favoring principle-driven adaptation. Communities flourished. John measured success through cohesion during crises. He felt fulfilled. Maria's lessons remained present, shaping judgment. He believed cultural strength lies in capacity to sustain humanity under pressure. The Philippines, through Maria, demonstrated this convincingly. John's life reflected synthesis rather than adoption. He honored origins respectfully. Maria's confidence proved justified, not through comparison, but through transformative impact. Her voice echoed through decisions, relationships, and institutions. John accepted stewardship responsibility. He understood now that listening precedes learning. Maria had spoken. He had listened. The result was enduring change, validating her belief in cultural values rooted in shared humanity and consistent practice. As John aged, he documented lessons carefully, avoiding romanticism. He emphasized effort required to sustain values. Readers responded, recognizing authenticity. Emily ensured research remained accessible, benefiting communities. Claire fostered continuity through mentorship. Maria's influence persisted invisibly. John recognized that cultural narratives risk oversimplification. He countered this by highlighting contradictions honestly. Maria had admitted flaws. This honesty preserved integrity. John encouraged dialogue across cultures, promoting mutual learning. He avoided claims of universality. Yet he maintained conviction about Philippine values' effectiveness in nurturing resilience. He cited lived evidence. Communities applied insights selectively. John observed positive outcomes. He understood that cultural strength attracts curiosity. Maria's assertiveness initiated inquiry, not conflict. John replicated this approach thoughtfully. He respected differences. Maria's example guided restraint. He believed cultural confidence must coexist with humility. His writings reflected this balance. He felt content. Maria's legacy endured not as monument, but as movement. John concluded that values survive through daily practice, reinforced by community. The Philippines' strength lay in this continuity. Maria had embodied it fully, inspiring lives beyond borders. John's story affirmed her conviction, validating her words through lived transformation sustained across time. Near life's end, John revisited first impressions, marveling at transformation. He remembered skepticism, now distant. Maria's question about who raised him resonated still. He finally understood its depth. He had been raised by systems, not stories. Maria reintroduced narrative. John shared this insight, encouraging others to seek origins. He believed reconnecting with heritage strengthened identity. Maria had modeled this. He acknowledged privilege enabling choice. He advocated equity. Maria's values demanded justice alongside compassion. John integrated this. He supported policies addressing inequality. He recognized culture alone cannot compensate for systemic failure. Maria had warned against romanticizing endurance. John honored this complexity. He believed Philippine values offered guidance, not excuse. He urged responsible application. Maria's influence matured his perspective. He felt gratitude. He expressed it through service. As he reflected, he accepted mortality calmly, influenced by Maria's acceptance. He trusted continuity. Emily and Claire continued work. Maria's story persisted. John believed cultural strength is measured by ability to humanize across generations. The Philippines demonstrated this through people like Maria. Her voice initiated change. John listened. The result was a life reoriented toward shared humanity, validating her assertion through enduring impact. The story concludes not with certainty, but with commitment. Maria's words continue influencing decisions daily, shaping communities quietly. Her confidence in Philippine cultural values rests on lived consistency, not rhetoric. Those she touched learned that strength resides in relationships sustained intentionally. John's journey illustrates transformation through listening. Emily's work demonstrates continuity through adaptation. Claire's service reflects compassion institutionalized. Maria's legacy affirms that cultures endure when values remain practiced collectively. The Philippine strength emerges through this continuity, balancing tradition with change. The story invites reflection rather than agreement. It challenges audiences to examine values shaping their lives. Maria believed conversation sustains culture. Her story continues wherever people choose dignity, respect, and community. The impact transcends geography, demonstrating that strong cultural values humanize effectively. The narrative remains open, inviting participation through practice. Maria's voice echoes, reminding listeners that culture lives through choices repeated daily. Her assertion stands validated through outcomes, not claims. The story persists, encouraging viewers to reflect, engage, and act. It affirms that cultural strength manifests through lived responsibility, shaping resilient communities across generations.